Welcome to the Doghouse Podcast. It is 40 days and counting until the kickoff of the 2024 college football season, and I cannot wait. Had the pleasure of being on the College Huddle SEC edition with Michael from the Fanatics Show. We talked about the potential of the 9-team conference SEC schedule, coaches on the hot seat, and the 12-team college football playoff schedule. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share the podcast. And as always, that'll really help us out.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome into another episode of the SEC on the College Huddle. I am your host, Michael. Unfortunately, my co-host, Chris, not able to join us tonight. He's on a little family trip. But I do have Trey from the Doghouse Podcast with us tonight. So, Trey, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty well. How's it going?
So, tonight, we're going to be discussing a little bit about 8-game conference schedule versus a 9-game conference schedule, and then do a little coaches on the hot seat in the SEC. So probably going to keep it short and sweet, but have a good conversation about this. So, Trey, the SEC has been at a 8-game conference schedule for a long time. As long as I can remember for sure. And, with all the conference expansion and stuff, everybody's talking about, well, is it time to go to a 9-game conference schedule? So before we kind of go into our details about it, what are your thoughts? Should the SEC stay at an 8-game conference schedule or go to a 9-game conference schedule?
That's a great question. I'm more of a traditionalist. I kind of liked where it is now, 8-game SEC schedule, and then you kind of get some of the non-con games. So, for example, like this year, Georgia's got, Clemson, which is a primetime matchup. They were supposed to have like UCLA, I think, in the years coming, that got canceled just because the whole Pac-12 type thing. We played Oregon, a couple years ago. So it gives you maybe some other eyes on the SEC or on Georgia, for example, that normally wouldn't with some non-con games. But also, I think people are getting tired and fatigued on the Texas Tech, Louisiana Monroe's kind of cupcake games, kind of filling in. So I can kind of see both ways. But if I had to pick, I like the 8 SEC games. But I will say with having Oklahoma and Texas coming in, it does have a lot more premier matchups and more exciting schedule matchups for overall college football, so I can see that. But if you had to pick, I like it where it is.
Yeah, so I'm a traditionalist as well. So I like the 8 games. I like picking up that big time matchup, or at least a decent matchup for that 9th game, because you're gonna play 3. Most years you're gonna play 3 teams that are those cupcake games. For Tennessee, it's a UT Martin, a UT Chat, Austin P, somebody like that. And then you have to have that FBS that Power 5 conference game. It doesn't matter who it is. I mean, Tennessee this past year had Virginia. At the time that it was scheduled, kind of looked like a pretty decent game, but Virginia kind of went down a little bit. Wasn't as good of a game once it came around. But, you mentioned it. You got Georgia Clemson to start off the season this year. We've got LSU USC this year in the opening weekend. Texas A&M against Notre Dame, Florida and Miami. You got some good matchups non-conference. You'd love to see those type games where if we go to a 9-game schedule, you're probably not going to see those type of matchups anymore. You're not going to get to play some of these teams that you otherwise might be able to, because your other 3 games you're wanting to schedule pretty easy. Because a 9-game conference slate, that's a lot of hard games. So I'm with you on that. I'm a traditionalist. I love the 8 conference games, but kind of getting into a little bit of our discussion here now. With 8 conference games, you're only going to have 1 rival that you play year in and year out. And then you've got 7 teams that you are rotating each year. Where a 9-game, you're looking at 3 rivals that you get to keep, and you're rotating 6. Here's where I get into, I like the 9-game as well, because if you have 9 games and you keep 3 rivals, you're going to get to keep those matchups like Georgia and Auburn, like Tennessee and Alabama, like LSU and Florida, where if you stay at 8 games with just that 1 rival, you're not going to get to keep those matchups because Auburn and Alabama are going to play. Tennessee is probably going to be Vanderbilt. Georgia's probably going to be Florida. I mean, you're going to have, and those are still some good matchups. Well, Tennessee, Vanderbilt's not, but that's side story. But you're going to have those good matchups right there. And then, yeah, every other year you're going to get to play that team again. But that's one of those games that you want to see year in and year out. And that's where I like the 9 game as well, is because you get to keep a lot of those matchups. I mean, Georgia and Auburn is a premier matchup. I mean, it's the Deep South's oldest rivalry. That's what the rivalry is called. And I don't want to see those type of games go away.
Yeah. Completely agree. One that we're going to miss this year is we played Georgia, South Carolina for years, and Columbia is pretty close to Athens. I'm here in Charlotte, so that's always one of the closest ones, so I'll miss that one. One I wouldn't mind maybe scrapping, and I know a lot of people say it's a rivalry game, but it's not anymore. Is like, let's say if we drop Georgia Tech, it's kind of always that little roadblock, little stumble in the road right before SEC championship game. Georgia's been in there recently. They played as competitive, but I mean, we have some crazy. I think I forget what it is, 50 something, 16. It's not one. I think last time we lost was Paul Johnson gave us some issues with triple option. So just saying, if we lost that one, I wouldn't miss it or cry or anything. But I will say, some of the matchups definitely. I think Georgia Florida is always going to be their big one for us. Georgia Auburn will probably keep. Then there's those kind of those kind of flip games, maybe like Kentucky. They're saying, even though I don't really see them as a rivalry either. I always like playing Tennessee, but that's a good look at schedule for sure.
I feel like Tennessee and Georgia, as of recently, going back mid-90s, early thousands, even going into the 2010s, that was a good rivalry. Now here lately it's been kind of one-sided because Georgia is just unbelievable and Tennessee's been down some. Now I hope that here in the 2020s that the rivalry is going to be a little bit closer, be competitive games. But, as of late, it hadn't seemed like much of a rivalry. But, the Philip Fulmer and the Mark Richt days, and those were some fantastic games right there. So I would probably consider.
You guys had an 8-game win streak. I believe you're giving us fits for a while.
Yeah, so I would consider Georgia as one of those type rivals for us. But I think for Tennessee, it would be obviously we want to keep Tennessee, Alabama. A lot of people are saying Tennessee, Florida, and that goes back to once again the 90s, the early thousands. You had Florida in their heyday with Steve Spurrier going up against the Peyton Manning teams, the T. Martins and all that. So that kind of developed into a rivalry there. But I would say that Tennessee's 3 would be Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Alabama. And I'm fine with that. But I want to see more of these rivalry games because, all right, let's just take Texas, for instance, coming into the conference. You have the Texas A&M games for years were the big rivalry games. Back in the mid 50s, 60s, 70s, something like that, you had Texas and Auburn. I mean, not Auburn, Arkansas. That was a big rivalry there. So I want to see more of those games as well instead of just you get that one premier game each year.
Yeah, completely agree. Another one like for Georgia is we still haven't gone to College Station, Texas A&M. They've been in the league since what 2012
I think.
Or whenever. Yeah, I mean we're going to Texas, so that's another one. They've came to Athens when Jimbo was there. When Jimbo was there, I believe it might have been one of the COVID years, 2020, 2021, I forget. But yeah, I mean we still hadn't visited or went on the road to all the SEC games. Also, potentially Georgia, Florida, getting a home and home with the renovations to Jacksonville. So that could be a reason for Georgia fans to go to the Swamp, and Florida Gator fans could go to Athens. So.
Okay, a little bit side note here off topic. I want to ask you about that game against Florida. Would you prefer having it home and home each year, or do you like the neutral site there in Jacksonville?
I'm kind of with Kirby's new thing. You can tell he's always wanted it for recruiting reasons to have it home and home, and I think it kind of goes back. It's been in Jacksonville. I mean, I've been to it probably 9 or 10 times. It was always great with some of my friends, but it's kind of like, the stadium's okay. It's a little rough around the edges, I'll say, for tailgating in the area. I would like it home and home. The reason is have Georgia fans be able to have a reason to go to the Swamp because they always talk about it, and go to Athens. So I would like that. Or if they made it where it was home and home, and then maybe like go to Jacksonville third year, go to Atlanta Mercedes-Benz, somewhere like that. But I wouldn't mind seeing change.
Yeah, I think just from an outsider looking at it, I would probably prefer to have a home and home type deal, or even like you said, have it, Jacksonville 1 year, have it Atlanta 1 year, something like that. I think that would be good. And like you said, with Kirby's point, it would be great for recruiting to be able to have that home and home there. But you mentioned Texas A&M. Y'all haven't gone there since Texas A&M came into the league. That's one thing, regardless of it being an 8-game schedule or a 9-game schedule, that I do like is now each senior, if they stay 4 years, will get to go to each team's stadium at least once. And I think it plays out where no, it would be once because you're going to play them 1 year, whether it be home or away, and then you're not going to play them the next. And then that following year, you would get the opposite of either home or away. So I do like how that's going to work out because you need to play each team every other year. I mean, Tennessee since 2012 when Texas A&M and Missouri came into the league, I think they've played Ole Miss in football once, and that was the infamous golf ball thrown at Lane Kiffin game. I mean, it's teams like that. You've only played them once in it's 12 years now. I'm not sure who Georgia. I know Georgia's got to have a team like that. You've only played once in 12 years. I mean, you're going to get to play each team twice in 4 years and get to travel to the other team's stadium. That, regardless of if it's 8-game or 9-game, or 9-game, I love that right there for the SEC.
Yeah, question for you on that. Has Tennessee visited all the current SEC schools, excluding Oklahoma and Texas, obviously? Have you guys all been on the road or at least went to their stadium?
That is a very good question that I'm not 100% sure about. I
put you on the spot. I always hear about Texas A&M from Georgia fans, so that's why I was asking.
I know Tennessee has gone to College Station. You got the 2016 year where Tennessee started off really well. That was the Josh Dobbs nail boot year, whatever they call it, at Georgia. But following game, played against Texas A&M, got beat in that game in overtime. So I know we traveled there. Traveled to LSU. I don't believe in that stretch we traveled to Arkansas. I know we go to Arkansas this season.
Have you been to the Grove? You're missing Ole Miss. Have you played there?
Okay, we have not gone to Ole Miss. We hosted Ole Miss, so maybe that's the team I'm thinking of. But yeah, it's crazy. Just you can go down any team and be like, well, how many times has this team played this team? Have they gone to this place? It's crazy that it worked out that way with the conference slate.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. So overall, I think no matter if you stay 8-game or you go to 9-game, there's gonna be good things on either side. There's gonna be some things that people don't like. I think to help keep more tradition, I probably lean towards 9-game as far as, the rivalry goes and all that. I love the rivalry games. Give me more rivalry games. I was listening to a podcast not too long ago. They were talking about trying to spread some of these rivalry games up from the last, you have rivalry week as the last regular season week of the season, trying to spread those throughout the year. Keep all of them on that one weekend for me. I like going back and forth between all of them. Georgia Tech, even though it might not be a premier matchup, that's still a rivalry game. Tennessee Vanderbilt is another one, not a premier, but that's a good rivalry game. You got Auburn, Alabama. You got Ohio State, Michigan. I believe it's going to be Texas A&M in that last game of the season. But I mean, you got matchups like that. Give me all of those on that one day. But then also give me the Georgia Auburns in the season, the Tennessee Alabamas, the LSU Floridas, the Texas Arkansas. Give me all that scattered throughout the season as well. So that's why I think I lean more towards a 9-game, the way it plays out that way.
Yeah. And speaking of that, they're switching up this year. They're actually playing Georgia Tech on Black Friday. It's going to be a night game in Athens. I don't think there's ever been a Friday night home game in Athens. So that's going to be really interesting. It's against the Nerds, but still
Yeah.
game on Black Friday. So it's switching it up, which is, I like it.
And one that really puzzles me, why would they move the Egg Bowl off of Thanksgiving?
Yeah, I did see that. Yep.
I know I hadn't seen as much from Mississippi State fans, but Ole Miss fans are mad about that. They love having the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving. I love, you get done with your Thanksgiving festivities, you're hanging around with family, and hey, let's turn the Egg Bowl on the TV. That's the highlight of my Thanksgiving, because I'm not an NFL fan. I love college football, and having that Egg Bowl on, that gives me something to look forward to on Thanksgiving Day at the end of the day.
Yeah, usually during those NFL games, taking a nap after, a turkey coma. But yeah, I do like that. And it's usually like kind of like rainy too. Remember, it's kind of like muddy. It's a nasty game, and they hate each other. And what was that one a couple of years ago? The dude like lifted his leg up like he was, I mean, just stuff like that. It's just they hate, big rivalry games. Great.
And that's one of those rivalries that anything can happen. I mean, you saw a couple of years ago, rest in peace, Mike Leach, but that was a Mississippi State team that wasn't very good. And Ole Miss, I think that was one of the years where they won 10 regular season games, or maybe it was 9. It was one of those years, but Ole Miss was the clear favorite in that game. And I think Mississippi State, Mike Leach, they went into the Grove, if I'm not mistaken, and pulled out a victory in that one. So, I mean, anything can happen in that Egg Bowl.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's always a competitive game. As they say, it's one of those throw all the record books and everything out. You had one other question you might be able to answer, just because I hadn't really looked at all the scheduling, ruling, and everything. So, what is it for the SEC championship game? Let's say, for example, Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia all had one loss. Like, do you know what the tiebreaker is? Because it is a lot of teams, and I still hadn't looked into it. Just wondering, because there's no East and West. So,
I'm not certain on that. I would say, of course, first off, it would go with head-to-head matchups, and it actually works out this year that all three of those teams play each other. So, Tennessee, Georgia play, Tennessee, Alabama play, Georgia, Alabama play. So, let's just say that, Georgia beats Tennessee, but Alabama beats Georgia, and then Tennessee beats Alabama. I think that it would go from there, maybe point differential. Something like that. I don't know. So I'm not certain what that tiebreaker would be, but I've got a feeling that in the first few years, we're going to see something like that work out, where they're going to have to go to the tiebreaker to see who makes it in.
Yep, there's going to be some salty fans. That always going to be people to complain. Like there's going to be a lot of complaining on whoever the 13th team left out is, top 12. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. So with that right there, let's go into another little topic before we get into the SEC hot seat. How do you feel about the 12-team playoff? Because Georgia has made the 14 playoff almost every year since 2017, something like that. I mean, they've been a consistent team in the 14 playoff. So how do you feel about it moving to a 12-team playoff?
Yeah, I mean, first off, last year was tough. We lost the game that we couldn't lose. I know it was a lot of debate. Alabama went from 1-6, 8-4. Georgia went from 1-6, one of the biggest jumps for number one team. But you didn't win the SEC championship game. With that said, I do like it from Georgia's standpoint. For Tennessee, it gives you more of a chance to get in the top 12. But it also is going to make the conference championship games irrelevant, because, this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. I was talking on another podcast with some other friends. Like, let's say Georgia goes 10-2. Let's say Tennessee beats them and they lose to Alabama, because Georgia's got a brutal schedule. It's almost like, do you want to maybe save their legs a little bit, skip the SEC championship game, maybe get like a 6th or 7th seed, maybe like Missouri, get some
try to get that at large.
Get a good matchup, and you're right there, and you're dangerous down the stretch. Then let's say 11-1, play that game, maybe lose a close one to Alabama or LSU, whoever it is. Maybe get banged up a little bit, lose running back, quarterback gets banged up, so it makes the SEC championship game. Even though Kirby says his still big goal is to win the SEC championship game, but hey, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So I think I like the 12 teams. It's great for Georgia, coming from a Georgia fan, but it makes the conference championships less relevant.
I think that you hit the nail on the head there because I love the 12-team playoff. I'm not a big fan of, they're talking about moving it to a 14-team playoff already. Let's see what the 12-team playoff looks like first. I think that the 12-team is a great thing, but I also agree with you. It's going to make the conference championships kind of irrelevant. The only thing that you're playing for at that point is the first round bye. And honestly, this is another thing. Do you want that first round bye? Because the first round of the playoffs, the games are going to be at the higher seeds home stadium. Can you imagine a playoff game in Athens, in Knoxville, in Tuscaloosa, in one of these SEC stadiums? Can you imagine the atmosphere for that game? I mean, yes, you obviously would love a bye, but at the same time, wouldn't you love to host a playoff game at your own stadium too?
Exactly. I would love that. Yeah, that's great. The only thing with that is, let's say if you're a lower SEC team, is maybe don't want to go to Michigan or Ohio State or whoever in December. That's my only thing is I'd hate to see Georgia somehow. I don't know if they had an off year and stumbled in 10-3 or something. You got to go to Ohio State and it's 10 degrees and a night game. I don't know about them, the Southern boys or Georgia boys. So that's my only thing. Just we want climate control and a good. Hell, it might be. It'd be cold in Knoxville if they had a playoff game in December. Athens would be chilly. So just it is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think 12-team playoff is a great thing. You're gonna have once again you're gonna have some cons about it, just like you will with anything. But I think the pros are gonna greatly outweigh those cons. But with that, we're going to move into some SEC coaches on the hot seat this year. So,
yes, sir.
Who's your first one you want to talk about?
I know we both love this school. I'm going to go dead man walking. Probably not surprising to go Billy Napier.
Yep.
I think he's got to get over 6 or 7. I don't see it. One of the most brutal schedules. I think that last 5 is like potentially top 5 top 10 teams. Couldn't happen to a better team. Graham Mertz doesn't scare me at all. They might start. I think that the tough ones are on the back end, but they might start out 2 or 3 or maybe win one he's not supposed to. But he's probably looking at 4-8, 5-7, and this is his 3rd year. It's important. I know they're trying to give him patience, but also who are you going to get? I'm sure you'll hear Dion and some of the flashier names, but I think you got to start out with him in the SEC's Billy Napier.
Yeah, so Florida's schedule, they start off the season at home against Miami. You play against – yeah, and I think that's a game that Billy Napier it's almost a must-win game in week 1 because if you don't win that one, and I'll go down the rest of the schedule, it's going to be hard to get to that 6-7 win mark if you don't win that one against Miami. So you got that one in week 1.
Mario Cristobal needs to win that one too. He's got a little heat, I think.
And I think that's what makes this matchup really intriguing in week 1 is because you got 2 coaches that it's a must-win game in week 1, and you don't see that often. So you got Florida, Miami. You got Samford in week 2. This should be an easy win. Then you bring in Texas A&M. This one's interesting to me because you got first-year head coach Mike Elko for Texas A&M, probably still trying to figure some things out at that point. I think Texas A&M's got a little bit more talent on that roster, but I think that's a game that Billy Napier could sneak up and win. That's almost another must-win type game for Billy Napier. Right. Then you travel to Mississippi State, another first-year head coach in Jeff Lebby. I think that'll be an interesting game. Another one there, if you're Florida, you've got to win. You host UCF in week 5, or you got a bye week before you play UCF. But
Gus Bus.
Yeah, and I think that's a game that UCF could very well go into Gainesville and win. I keep saying must win, but all of these games towards the beginning of the season are must wins for Florida if you're going to get to that mark. Yeah, because then you get into the meat of your schedule. You travel to Tennessee on October the 12th. You host Kentucky, who's had your number for the last couple of years. Then you play against Georgia in Jacksonville. You go to Texas. You host LSU, host Ole Miss, and travel to Florida State to end the year.
Brutal. That's tough, man.
Yeah, I mean, one of the toughest schedules, if not the toughest schedule that we have ever seen in college football. I've said it multiple times, and I'll say it again. Billy Napier had one of the toughest jobs to do coming into Florida because on his way out the door, Dan Mullen threw up the double birds and said, screw all of you. I'm going to take this program down to the bare minimum, and y'all are going to have to rebuild it. And, Billy Napier, he's done about as good of a job as he can. But for Florida standards, it's not good enough what he has done. So I think I'm right there with you. If you don't at least get to 500 with this schedule, then I think you're gone, especially with the lawsuit that has come out from Jaden Rashada against the Florida collective and Billy Napier personally. If it was me, if I was Florida's athletic department, if I'm not happy with Billy Napier, then that would have been my excuse to say, hey, we don't want you anymore. But you also said it. Who are you going to go get? Exactly. Who's going to come to Florida? I mean,
I think Florida fans puts it at a higher bar than it used to be. But if you really look at it, they haven't really done anything since Tebow was there in 2008. I mean, they've struggled a lot, went through several coaches. Muschamp, who was it? You got you got Napier now.
You got Dan Mullen that was there.
Jim McElwain, we call him Swamp Donkey, even though he won the East. But it wasn't great. Also looking at it here, I think I was looking at this coaching hotseat.com. I think he's getting 6.9 a year, so I'm not sure what his contract is. So that's not going to be fun with the buyout. I know he's in his third year. But here's your question real quick, Michael. What does he have to do to stay? If he gets 7 wins, somehow pulls it out 7-5, he stays, or what do you think saves him?
I think with this schedule that he has got this year, if you can go 500 and make a bowl game, I think you keep him around. But I think you've also got to win a game, which really there's multiple games that if you win, you're going to be an underdog in that game. I think Texas A&M, you're going to be a home underdog against Texas A&M. And if you pull that one off, I think you're making yourself a decent case to be able to keep your job. A game like that, I think Kentucky. Now we'll see where both of these teams are when we get to this point in the season. But on October the 19th, if you play against Kentucky and beat them, a game that you're likely to be another home underdog, I think that's another good case. And, of course, if you go into Knoxville and you knock off Tennessee, because Tennessee has struggled against Florida. They've got 2 wins in the last, 17, 18 years, something like that, and both of those were at home. If you happen to go into Knoxville and knock off Tennessee, I think that's your job's secure at that point, unless the rest of the year you just go 3-9. So I do think if you hit that 500 mark, I think that buys you 1 more year at least, but you got to start showing some improvements. What do you think?
Completely agree. I just like after you said that those last 5 games, man, that's murderer's row, and might come down. Let's say if it's 5-6, and Florida State is a bit. When you ask any Florida fan who the one they want to beat, they usually mention Florida State. The ones I've talked to. Let's just say he's 5-6, and let's say Florida State blows the wheels off of them, beats them by 3 scores. I forget where the game is. He might not make it back, or they might be having a press conference that Monday because 5-7, you missed the bowl game, just got blown out by one of your biggest rivals. Might be the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, and that'll be tough because that one is in Tallahassee this year, so it'll be tough to get there, but. Yeah, Billy Napier, absolutely number 1 on the list, in my opinion. Number 2, Sam Pittman. Sam Pittman, he had some really good years to start. He won games that he probably shouldn't have, and caused some high expectations in Arkansas. Now, he has had the unfortunate injury bug hit the last couple of years. It's kind of hindered him some, but at the same time, this is a guy that is very good, or is supposed to be very good when it comes to linemen, especially the offensive line, and had an absolutely atrocious offensive line this past year that nearly got KJ Jefferson killed on numerous occasions. I mean, if you can't protect your guy in the backfield, you're not going to be able to do anything. And that defense too, last year was, I mean, couldn't hardly stop anybody. Yeah. And they're one play away each game almost, it seems like, from pulling it off. I mean, Alabama, I think they got beat by 3. You got the BYU game towards the beginning of the year this past year. You were a Hail Mary away from pulling that one off. LSU, I think, was even a close game. So, I mean, I think they were 4-8 this past year, and you were 4 or 5 plays away from being 8-4. But, shoulda, coulda, wouldas. You've had a couple of years in a row where you hadn't met the expectations that was put out for you in the preseason. And I think that Sam Pittman could be mid-season out the door.
Yeah, completely agree. I think he had a lot of hype around him. I remember 2021, the Georgia game. They came into his big-time matchup game day, and they were undefeated. I think it might have been a top 10, top 15 matchup. I was at that game, and Georgia blew the wheels off of them, kind of exposed them. But they were 4-0 at the time, had a lot of hype behind them. And I think the bottom kind of fell out, and they didn't finish that strong. And Sam Pittman, 23 and 25 from my stats here.
Yeah.
Getting 6.3 a year. First off, great guy. I think he's a great Arkansas guy, like great person, great recruiter. I think
I absolutely love Sam Pittman as a person.
Yeah, he is. Good on the mic, by the way, on his press conferences. And I loved him at Georgia, man. He got we had the best O-line recruiting ever at Georgia. I mean, he was lining them up. I hated to miss him or when he left. But, hey, if he takes the L, just go ahead and say this. I don't mind. Hey, you want to come on back to Athens? I'd take you in a heartbeat.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
He's great. He's great on that end. But, yeah, he's back against the wall. I'd say him and Napier are about even on a hot seat. But you never know. I'm pulling for him, but we'll see. Georgia doesn't play him this year. I hope best for him.
Yeah, Tennessee does play them. So here's Arkansas' schedule. You start the season off against Arkansas Pine Bluff. Then you travel to Oklahoma State in week 2 to face old Mike Gundy. So could be that would be a very good game. We'll see. We'll see what exactly happens in that game. Then hosting UAB in week 3. UAB is a tricky team, but I think that's one that Arkansas should win. Then you travel to Auburn. This is an Auburn team that I right now cannot figure out because you've got Hugh Freeze down there. I think that he's got Auburn trending in the right direction, but is it going to happen this year? We'll see.
That's quarterback. I think is it Thorne is still the guy. He didn't blow my hair back.
No, absolutely. But I think that's almost a must-win game if you're Arkansas in week 4. Then you travel to College Station. Last year's game was in Dallas, AT&T Stadium. I don't know if that's going to be another neutral site game or if they're actually going to College Station this year. But either way, playing against Texas A&M, not going to be an easy game. Then you host Tennessee. You host LSU. You travel to Mississippi State. You host Ole Miss, Texas, Louisiana Tech, and then travel to Missouri to finish off the year. So I'm looking right here at 3 wins as far as Louisiana Tech, Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and then UAB. Mississippi State, I think, could be a win. We'll see where both of these programs are at that point. Auburn, a little bit of a toss-up game. And then you're going to have to pull some upsets. I mean, you got Texas A&M, Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas, and Missouri. So it's not going to be an easy road for Sam Pittman. So I'll ask you the question first here. Where do you think Sam Pittman has to finish this year to have a chance to keep his job?
Yeah, I think he'll kind of like Billy Napier. He'll have to go maybe 6-6, 7-5 would be great for him. Also looking at, I guess I didn't realize, is he's got an old name back from the program, Bobby Petrino at OC and QB. Another one is who's going to be their quarterback. I know KJ Jefferson. I think he transferred to UCF, which is surprising. But they got some portal guys. But I think that's going to be where it starts. Is Bobby Petrino just was at Texas A&M, got him fired. I think that was a Jimbo Fisher desperation, got him fired. So he might be about to get Sam Pittman fired. But I mean, he is good. Got a little shady pass, but he's good X's and O's, OC. But I think it kind of starts at who's your quarterback. You can kind of go from there. So that's going to be the big question.
Yeah. So, kind of a side question here. If Pittman gets fired, do they give the job to Petrino or do they go outside again?
I'd go outside again. Just that whole you already got burned once with the young lady on the back of the motorcycle and the neck brace. That's what I remember with Bobby Petrino. He's got a sketchy past, and he left the Falcons high and dry that time. I'm a Falcons fan, 3-13 or whatever it was. So yeah, I'd go somewhere else if I were them, but it's out of my pay grade.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, and I'm also with you. I think he's at least got to go 500, and I'm almost. I know the schedule really doesn't kind of line up for it, but I'm almost thinking you got to go 7-5 to be able to keep your job. But we'll see. I think that I think that Sam Pittman is almost like we said with Billy Napier. He's almost a dead man walking at this point. Yep. So we'll see what happens there.
I think he'd be definitely a big name on the coordinator side. He'd get a job right away. It depends on – I know he's got some age on him, but if he wanted to come back, I'm sure somebody'd scoop him up as an O-line coach in a minute. So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that he's a guy kind of like Ed Orgeron. He's a better assistant coach or a coordinator somewhere than he is a head coach. So
yes, I completely agree.
Yeah, just like what you said, if he became available somewhere – I wouldn't mind having, talking to him, say, hey, come be my O-line coach. I'm not going to say I'm not going to say D-line coach because we got a pretty good one up in Tennessee, but yeah, O-line coach. Yeah, come on. I think that he would be a great assistant coach there, but do you have a third in the SEC as far as the hot seat?
I'm going to give a little honorable mention. I've been saying this. I said this on another podcast. They might not like it. I think Shane Beamer has a warm seat. 20-18, coming off 5-7. Some of the coaches and people around, he's just been saying some weird things, and he's kind of pointing fingers a little bit. I don't really know who the quarterback is going to be. He had Rattler, who was good, and he got top the third or fifth round. I forget where he went. So he was a solid quarterback, quick release. He did some good things. I remember them, beating Clemson that 2 years ago, which is surprising.
Oh, you beat Tennessee that same year, so yeah, not Tennessee out of the playoffs.
I didn't want to bring that up and dig salt in the wound on that. But yeah, that was. But and Georgia doesn't play him this year, and I don't know. I liked him at first because he was a Georgia guy, but man, he's a little whiny to me. I'm not a Beamer fan, and
I'm not either.
He's 20-18, but who are you going to get? Because South Carolina fans are diehards, but basically like he's a 6 or 8 win program, maybe even a 6. That's what they are. So Shane Beamer to me is I think a little warm seat. Like if he's got to probably get keep it maybe 8 wins, 8-9 wins would be great. But I don't even know who their quarterback is. That's another thing. I didn't really follow the spring. So
yeah, I'm not certain.
If you got their schedule, might be interesting to see what the schedule is. Might have a brutal schedule.
Yeah, I've got their schedule. We'll go through that here in just a minute. I'm not certain who their quarterback is either, but here's another question for you. What exactly is South Carolina's expectations? I know neither one of us are South Carolina fans, but what do you think South Carolina's expectations for a season should be? Should it be 8 wins, 9 wins? I mean, obviously it's not national championship. I mean, even with Steve Spurrier at the helm, I mean, I think he definitely elevated South Carolina's expectations, but even with him, it wasn't national championship type expectations. He never did have those type of seasons. So what exactly is South Carolina's expectations with the head coach?
Yeah, I think I have a close friend. We talk about it sometimes. He's a more realistic fan, but he's in that 6-7 win range. Anything over that, like 8-4 a couple of years ago was great, and they had a couple of upsets. But anything more than that, they're not. I mean, they had Spurrier had them those 3 10-year wins. I think that was their heyday. They knew that was a special time, but it's being right there. Clemson, was a juggernaut, 2 national titles. They're still a good program, but I think then Georgia right there and Clemson kind of takes most of the big time recruits, and they struggle on the recruiting. They might be like top 20, but that's not going to get you 9, 10, 11 wins. So 6, 7 on a good year, 8-year program is the way I see it.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. I think somewhere around 7-5, 8-4, around that mark, that's your expectation. And like you said, anything better than that is a huge bonus. So, but Shane Beamer was also on my list. Now I've got some family at South Carolina fans, and a few of them said that they love Shane Beamer. They love what he brings to the program. A few of them said, I'd rather move on from him. I'm one of those that I'm not a big fan of him either. I think that he's weird. He applauds some of the things that I feel like is silly, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff too that I'm not going to get into. But South Carolina's schedule this year, you start off with Old Dominion at home. You start off early with SEC plays. You travel to Kentucky in week 2. That's going to be an interesting matchup. See where both of these teams are at this point. Then you host LSU. It's not going to be an easy game before you play Akron. And then you go on a little 3-game gauntlet here too with hosting Ole Miss, traveling to Alabama, and then traveling to Oklahoma. And we'll see where Brent Venables has that Oklahoma team at this point in the year as well. You host Texas A&M after that, travel to Vanderbilt, host Missouri before playing Wofford, and then going to Death Valley to play against Clemson to finish off the year. So I think the schedule kind of lines up where South Carolina could go 6-6. Mm-hmm. I think at that point, Shane Beamer's probably safe. But I think if you have a losing record this year like you did last year, that seat warms up quite a bit, and we could be looking at the end of the season, Shane Beamer being out as South Carolina's head coach.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, 6-6, 7-5. That would keep him safe. Looking up here, it looks like Lenora Sellers, who's a 3-star, I guess, was named in the spring back in May as their starting quarterback. Don't really know much about him. I think they do have Robbie Ashford, who was a transfer from Auburn. I think he's on the team. They said he did some things in the spring, but I guess not good enough. To me, he's a great athlete, but just not accurate. Runs around, but he's not really accurate throwing the ball. Georgia played him. Robbie Ashford, so we'll see.
Yeah, he's a fantastic athlete. I'm like you. He's got some things to work on in the passing game. Now that you say Lenora Sellers, I do remember that name. I didn't realize that that he was named a starter. But, yeah, I remember that name coming out of South Carolina. Shane Beamer, number 3 there. Trying to think right now. Oh, I do have a 4th one.
Okay.
Clark Lee at Vanderbilt. So, first off, let's get this on the table. What exactly is Vanderbilt's expectations each year? Because for me personally, you have to win your non-conference games. Yeah, you've got to play a Power 5 school somewhere in there. A lot of times Vanderbilt doesn't play a great Power 5 school. I mean, you had Wake Forest last year. They weren't great, but if your defense just wasn't god-awful last year, you probably go into Wake Forest to win that game. This year, that game is Virginia Tech. Once again, Virginia Tech, not a great program, but they're a program that is going to give other teams fits this year. So I think if you're Vanderbilt, you have to win your non-conference games. And if you can sneak up and get one SEC win somewhere, I think that's your expectation. So you're looking at what, 3-4 wins, maybe a 5th as your expectation. What do you think as far as Vanderbilt?
Yeah, I completely agree. Looking at it, it looks like Clark Lee 9-27, in 3 seasons. It's Vanderbilt at the end of the day. You know, they do struggle. I always heard. I mean, first off, last year with the the stadium, you had guys getting ready and covered tents or whatever it was. I heard the Georgia games like terrible field conditions. I know it got construction. I figured they didn't plan really well for that. And then, you know, their heyday was James Franklin. I think they were very, very competitive, and they got some wins they probably shouldn't have, but they did. And then he's at Penn State now. But like I said, 3, 4, 5 win. If you can somehow get a 6-6 is great. You can put to the statue there in Nashville, but it's just hard to recruit. Vanderbilt, I do wonder why, even they're part of the SEC, very good at academics. But I think they're kind of sticking their hand out being part of the whole SEC contracts and TVs. They're just happy to be there, you know, kind of like maybe the overweight girl at the party. Hey, I'm over here, I'm eating all the food. I'm glad to be here, you know. I mean, that's what they are. I mean, you see them on there. He's for a Georgia fan. You put them down as a W. I mean, they scored real quick last year, made it interesting. But we did get their top wide receiver, which was good. So, I mean, it's Vanderbilt, good at academics, but and I think they were good in baseball a couple years back, right? So, football wise, yeah, 3, 4, 5 win program. That's what they are. And I think when you talk to alumni, they know what's up.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, I was really high on Clark Lee because the year before, he took Vanderbilt to 5-7. Now, granted, he took advantage of a bad bottom half of the SEC. I mean, got a home win against Florida, in which they tried storming the field. Basically, it was just a single file line out of the stadium onto the field, but picked up a win against Missouri that year. So you got 2 SEC wins, 3 non-con wins as well. So, I mean, I was really high on Clark Lee last year going into the season. And then you pick up your first 2 wins of the season and then drop to UNLV and Wake Forest, and then just didn't even come close in any SEC game. So I think that seat is looking pretty warm for Clark Lee going into this year, and the schedule once again is not easy for them. I mean, you start off at home against Virginia Tech before playing Alcorn State. Then you go to Georgia State. Interesting.
You can somehow go 2-1 out of those. Might be looking okay, maybe.
Yeah. Then you go to Missouri before hosting Alabama. Hopefully, we don't have any defensive players say, Alabama, you're next, like they did last time, because that wasn't pretty. You go to Kentucky, and I tell you what, depending on where Kentucky is at this point in the season, that could be an interesting game between Kentucky and Vanderbilt. Then you get Ball State in the middle of the season. Look to hopefully pick up your 3rd, possibly 4th win of the season. Then you host Texas. You go to Auburn, host South Carolina, travel to LSU, and then host Tennessee to end the season. So
brutal back end.
Yeah, very, very brutal. But, you know, depending on where South Carolina is at that point in the season, too, that could be an interesting matchup. And you do get them at home. So we'll see what Clark Lee does with this team this year. Like I said, I was high on him after the 5-7 year. Now I've got no expectations for Vanderbilt, but we'll see what happens there. But what do you think Vanderbilt has to do this year for Clark Lee to keep his job?
I think you somehow go 5-7, and maybe if they give you one of those, I hate to say those crappy bowls, 5-7, we kind of squeak in there one of those December 19th, December 20, whatever it is. I think that would be a win-win. He'd stay. But you go 2, 3, 4 wins, and you're already 9-27. I mean, I don't know how much patience. I mean, it's Vanderbilt. That's just you'll probably have some interesting talks with the AD.
You know, I'll give him 4-8 this year. I think if he goes 4-8, as long as you win your 3 games against Ball State, Georgia State, and Alcorn State for sure, and then sneak up and get a Virginia Tech, a Kentucky, a South Carolina, a Missouri, you know, and I don't know why I had Missouri in there because I've got Missouri going 11-1, 10-2 this year, but their schedule also lines up for it. I think if you go 4-8 this year, then you're safe. But then the question also becomes, who are you going to get if you fire Clark Lee? Because unlike Florida, because I think there's some coaches that'll go to Florida that would willingly leave wherever they're at to go to Florida. Who's leaving their job to go to Vanderbilt? So, I mean, who do you get?
Kind of coordinator, I think.
Yeah. So,
if he goes 4-8 and there's competitive in some games, maybe lose, 10 points, 7, right, real competitive and sneak up on some people, that would help too as well. But if you just get the wheels blown off every game, that's not gonna help.
And I'm not certain who the quarterback is for this team this year. They had a freshman last year got to play in some games. I was very impressed by. He's very athletic. He's a tall guy. Didn't get to see him throw the ball much, but he impressed me at times. And I think Vanderbilt's offense last year was good enough to win some games. They just had an absolutely horrific defense that couldn't stop anybody. And that's what hurt them against UNLV when they traveled out there to play them was their defense. The offense was fine. So I think that Vanderbilt's not terribly far from being a mediocre team, but it's one of those situations, you don't really expect much from Vanderbilt regardless. So do you have any other names that maybe they're not on the hot seat for getting fired this year, but you kind of look at them like, hey, you need to perform well this year. Otherwise, you might be on the hot seat going forward?
Yeah, I got one. This will be out of the SEC because there's so much hype around them. I mean, we're going to be ranked number 1. You probably know where I'm going. But Mr. Ryan Day out of Ohio State. First off, 56-8, but you've lost Michigan, and that's a hated rival 3 straight times. Michigan won the national title, and Harbaugh bounces. Probably the best thing he could do to goes to the Chargers. And they're in win-now mode. Caleb Downs, huge transfer. We want him real bad. I felt like Georgia should have got him. Got Will Howard. Spent a lot of money in the portal. Got the kid from
Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss.
That's right. So win now. I think it's definitely playoffs, of course. It might be national title or bust for Ryan Day. And these Michigan losses, and you just see social media after them. And then I know it was a bowl game and everybody cashed out, but what, three points against Missouri? I mean, that was a butt whipping in that bowl game, and that's all about culture. So I'm gonna go with Shane Beamer, top 4 semifinals or whatever the setup is, or bust or national title or bust. Like they're in win now mode. Like he's got to win. A lot of heat behind him.
You mean Ryan Day?
I'm sorry, yeah, Ryan Day. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I've gone on I've called into the Ohio podcast, talked to Eric and Chris and them, and I've asked them, is it national championship or bust? And I think they're with that right there. This year it is national championship, or hey, the questions have got to start being asked. And you would think with a 56-8 overall record that this guy is safe, but I mean, when you mentioned it, you lose to your rival 3 years in a row. You haven't just won that big game. I mean, you could say Penn State, but I mean, Penn State has been teetering on mediocre, but they have a good year in and year out because of a bad Big Ten, other than Michigan, Ohio State, and themselves, Penn State. So yeah, I think absolutely Ryan Day is on the hot seat this year.
And he's getting $10 million a year, so that's not anything to shake a stick at too. It's not cheap.
Yeah, and one thing that we didn't even mention is you go out and you hire Chip Kelly as your offensive coordinator too. I mean, they really are. They're going all out for it this year. So.
And I guess they got the Will Howard kid. I mean, he's pretty good at Kansas State, so that'll be interesting. I don't think he's a C.J. Stroud, and I know last year – what's the guy's name? He kind of struggled a little bit. He was just another guy.
Kyle McCord, I think.
Kyle McCord, yeah, had some Ohio State buddies. They kept calling him, he's just another dude type guy. So I think that's where it starts. But their defense will be loaded. They got a lot of pieces. Marvin Harrison Jr., they'll definitely miss. I'm not sure about their wideouts. But, looking at their schedule, I was looking at, Akron, Western Michigan, bye week, Missouri. I'm sorry, not Missouri, Marshall. So that's 3-0 at Michigan State. They should beat them. You got Iowa. And then you got at Oregon. That'll be a big one. October 12th. Good non-con game there. Bye week. Nebraska. At Penn State. That'll be tough. Purdue, Northwestern, Indiana, and then Michigan. So definitely some winnable games. But, I mean, weaker schedule compared to the SEC. I know all Big Ten fans, they would, we're the Big Ten. But, yeah, he's in win now mode, Ryan Day. I'm interested to see it. And I like calling him the suck eyes. That's what I call him.
Yeah. I'll say this, though. You don't say Michigan to them, though. It's the team up north. Oh, yeah. So
that's right. I call them their friends from the north. They don't like that.
you just play with fire on that one, don't you? So.
I do. I'm still living off the. It was a stressful New Year's Eve when we beat them, and I know they keep saying, "Well, that was man." They're still talking about it. That was a late hit in the back of the end zone there. But I bring up all the years Alabama beat us. It was time. I mean, we gutted it out. National title. That was you couldn't have had a better New Year's. Shanked it left. Hey, Dogs win. Happy New Year. It was great, and then we ended up rolling and beat TCU. But that was a great program. That was a great game. Give it to them at the end of the day. Probably should have lost that game, Georgia, but Stetson Bennett and the boys somehow found a way to win it. But, yeah, that's why I keep kind of digging it in. And I think Ohio State's one of the most hated fan bases too.
Yeah, between them and Michigan and Alabama and, Georgia's getting on up there now because of the success that they've had lately. But
we are.
Yeah,
I'm just
all those
enjoying
teams.
The ride, man. I mean, all those years of disappointment. So I'm just enjoying the ride. Kirby Smart's got them rolling. That's all I'll say.
Yep. Hey, you got a reason to be enjoying that ride too. But
exactly.
So Trey, you want to tell the folks where they can find you?
Yes, sir. We're on Twitter, as I like to call it. At Doghouse on Twitter. Doghouse Podcast on Doghouse Podcast on YouTube. We're at 372 on the road to 1,000. Be great to actually get monetized. And then we're also on Instagram at the Doghouse Podcast, and we're also on Spotify. So we're growing there. Got some great guests coming up. Love collaborating with College Huddle and yourself, Michael. Well, I'll get you on when we play you guys this year. And it's been a great community. Love doing the College Huddle and collaborating with everybody. It's been great.
Yeah, the College Huddle is a fantastic thing. Being able to do collaborations like this right here. Skylar and I over at the Vol Fanatics Show, we've done it numerous times with different people. And we're definitely looking forward to this season being able to have you on, have some other guys from the SEC on whenever we get to those games as well. So you can find me at Vol Fanatics 1998 on Twitter and Vol Fanatics Show on every other platform: Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. We're not doing quite as well as Trey is on YouTube, but we're moving up too. We're at 230 subscribers, moving up. And once we get to football season, I've got a feeling a lot of us are going to start getting some more viewers, get more subscribers, and all that, because we're in a down period right now. It's hard. It's hard to make the content that we really want to. But looking forward to a lot of it in the football season. So Trey, appreciate you coming on this week. Looking forward to having you on again in the future. And guys, tune in next week, next Thursday night, as we have another episode of the SEC on the College Huddle.